I was fired and framed before the main course hit the table. The phone vibrated once against the linen, sharp enough that I felt it in my bones. Around me, crystal glasses chimed. Someone thanked donors for believing in resilience. A waiter leaned in to place a plate I hadn't ordered. Don't bother coming back. You're fired. Security will collect your badge at the gate. No greeting, no call, no meeting scheduled for the morning. Just a clean decision, dropped in the middle of a gala where every smile was being photographed. My name is Marla Hensley. I am 46 years old. The sentence surfaced while I kept my hand steady, while my fork hovered uselessly over an untouched plate, while my body decided that stillness was the only thing keeping this from turning into a spectacle. Another vibration followed before I could lock the screen. A forwarded internal email, no subject line, no commentary. My name appeared in the last paragraph. Neat and deliberate, assigning sole operational responsibility to me effective immediately. The language was careful, legal, the kind that pretends this wasn't a setup. Across the table, conversation thinned. Someone reached for their wine and stopped halfway. No one noticed me yet, but the air had changed. It always does when a decision this final has already been made somewhere else. Arthur Vance sat to my right. He ran a logistics empire that moved government cargo most people never learned existed. He had insisted I sit beside him tonight, close enough that the cameras would catch us in the same frame. I turned my phone so the screen faced him. Arthur, I said, keeping my voice even because panic is loud and control is not. It looks like your $75 million contingency plan just got erased. He didn't answer. The glass in his hand stopped turning. His eyes moved from the text to the email. The smile he'd been wearing for donors drained away without ceremony. The room kept going. Plates slid into place. A violin section rose and fell. The gala pretended nothing had shifted. But I could feel the weight of what had just been triggered. This story is a fictional account created by our writing team. Inspired by imagined events and real-world pressures, Arthur's phone lit his palm. His thumbs moved once, deliberate, somewhere across the ballroom. Someone checked their screen and went very still. I stayed seated, spine straight, because standing would have meant admitting I was already gone. What kind of executive pulls the pin on a fail-safe while the witnesses are still applauding Arthur, set his phone face down, and finally looked at me, not with sympathy, but with calculation? And that was when I understood the night had stopped being about my job and started being about survival. Arthur didn't reach for me. He didn't lower his voice or offer a practiced line about how unfair it all was. The glass in his hand stopped moving. And that was the first real sound of the night breaking. He read the screen again. Not quickly, not skimming. His jaw set the way it does when a number doesn't reconcile. Did legal authorize this? The question landed flat on the table between us. Not concern, not curiosity. Procedure. I shook my head once. Small, controlled, enough. His eyes lifted, not to me at first, but past me, scanning the room as if he were counting exits. A man like Arthur Vance doesn't panic in public. He inventories. That can't be right. Came from across the table. Too fast. From a director whose name I never remembered because it never mattered. Arthur didn't look at him. The interruption evaporated on contact. He turned back to my phone, then to the email, the line with my name. The assignment of risk. He exhaled through his nose. Sharp. They didn't check. He said, not to me, not to anyone in particular. His thumb hovered, then tapped his own screen awake. I watched the muscles in his forearm tighten as he typed. No flourish, no anger, just intent, the kind that doesn't need volume. You didn't fire an employee. He sent, you severed your own artery. He didn't press send right away. He looked at me then. Really looked. Like he was finally seeing the shape of the machine instead of the dashboard. You're still active, he said. It wasn't a question. For now, a beat. Another glance around the table. Someone cleared their throat and pretended to check the program. Plates cooled. The band hit a pause it hadn't rehearsed. Arthur leaned back just enough to break the line of sight from the stage. If they think they can push this through without federal clearance, he said, They're about to learn how slow everything gets. I felt the weight of that settle. Not relief, pressure, the kind that tightens your chest because you know speed is no longer yours to control. Why would a billionaire CEO react with fear instead of sympathy? Arthur's phone vibrated once. He didn't check it. He set it face down, a deliberate gesture, and reached for his glass again. "Finish your plate," he said quietly. "We're about to have company." Across the room, two men in dark suits had stopped pretending to enjoy the music and started looking for someone specific. Arthur's glass touched the table and stayed there. He didn't drink. He watched the room like it might blink first. "You don't get removed from a system like this by accident," he said. "Someone wanted the lights off." The line landed harder than the firing had. Not because it surprised me, but because it fit. I'd been here 15 years, long enough to watch 2 expansions and 1 quiet panic nobody admitted to. 5 years back, the company nearly folded on a Thursday afternoon. Credit froze. Shipments stacked. Phones rang until they didn't. Investors showed up with conditions instead of sympathy. They didn't want a plan. They wanted a name. Mine. The clause they wrote wasn't ceremonial. It was specific. Continuity supervised by one person. No delegation. No proxy. No shortcuts. I didn't argue it because arguing would have weakened it. I built the authorization system myself, not the interface they showed the board. The back end, the approvals that mattered. The checks nobody bragged about because bragging invites interference. Without my credentials, the chain doesn't limp, it locks. 24 hours and nothing sensitive moves. A man in a dark suit leaned in from the aisle. "Mr. Vance." "The schedule." Arthur didn't look at him. The man stopped talking. "My CEO called it legacy overhead." I said, the words tasted stale. He wanted speed. Thought I was slowing things down. Arthur's mouth tightened. Did he ask what you actually controlled? No. If I was replaceable. Why did the entire system stop without me? Arthur picked up his phone again. This time turning it so I could see the screen light with unread alerts. He didn't open them. He didn't need to. "They're going to try to override you," he said. "They always do. They can try." A new vibration cut through the table. Not mine. His, then another. From somewhere behind us. The band missed a cue. Someone swore under their breath. Arthur stood. Chair scraping just enough to draw eyes. "We're done here," he said. Already stepping away. "Stay seated." Across the room. 2 men started moving with purpose. My phone warmed in my hand again. This time with a different kind of weight. The clock had started, and it wasn't mine anymore. The pattern showed itself once I stopped pretending it was coincidence. 3 months. That's how long it takes to erase someone without making noise. Access first. A delay when I logged in, then a denial that came wrapped in a friendly template. Meetings next, calendar invites restructured. My name quietly missing when agendas circulated. People stopped asking for approvals and started telling me things had already moved. I'd asked about it once. Not loudly. The answer came with a smile that didn't reach the eyes and a promise to circle back. It never did. I pulled my laptop closer and opened the audit trail I still had. Timestamps lined up too neatly. Approvals I hadn't made, routed through my credentials anyway, my signature block copied, then reused where it didn't belong. The language was familiar. Mine. That was the point. A message popped up from a number I recognized without saving. "Can you confirm this authorization?" The attachment opened to a document dated last week. Sensitive routing, government linked. My name at the bottom. I didn't sign that. I typed back. The reply came fast. Too fast. "System shows you did." I closed the file and felt the room tighten. This wasn't sloppiness. This was preparation. They needed my name on the paper before they pushed me out. Needed the trail to lead back to a door they planned to slam. What happens when you realize you weren't fired, you were framed? Footsteps stopped near my chair. A voice leaned in from behind, low and rehearsed. "Compliance is asking questions. You should sit tight." I looked up at the reflection in the black glass of my screen. I am another alert. This one internal. A draft accusation, still marked private, alleging data misuse. My name again. Same phrasing. Same cadence. Someone had learned my habits well enough to weaponize them. The clock in the corner of my screen ticked forward. The purge had been quiet, but the next move wouldn't be... I closed the laptop and stood. Not because I was done, but because waiting any longer would hand them another minute they didn't deserve. The contract lived where I kept things I didn't trust anyone else to read. I scrolled past the sections I knew by heart and stopped where the language turned thin. Gross misconduct? Capitalized? Broad enough to drive a truck through. If they could make that stick, the protections I'd built would fold in on themselves. Continuity meant nothing if the holder was discredited. My phone lit again. Not a call. A system notice. Unusual data activity detected. Then another. Investigation initiated. I forwarded the alert to the address that still answered me on bad nights. The reply came back with no greeting and no delay. We're seeing an internal accusation. Data exfiltration. That's false. I typed. We know. Came back, but it's been logged under your credentials. I pulled the access logs. Timestamps overlapped meetings I'd been removed from. Locations I hadn't been in. The pattern was clean. Too clean. Someone had rehearsed this. A chat window opened from IT. Can you step into a call? Send it. I wrote. The voice on the line stayed calm. The way people sound when they think they're recording. We need to understand why sensitive files were accessed outside protocol. Show me the key used. I said. A pause. Not long. Long enough? That isn't available. It is. I replied. You just don't want to share it. Silence stretched. Then a softer tone. This will be easier if you cooperate. I leaned back and let the quiet sit. Cooperation was what got names moved onto paper without consent. Cooperation was how traps stayed invisible. What if the system designed to protect me could be used to bury me instead? Another message slid in. This one marked confidential. Draft language? Intentional misuse? Breach of trust? My name threaded through it like a fuse. I closed the contract and stood. The flaw was real, but it wasn't fatal. Not if I moved first. My phone buzzed again, an internal calendar update I hadn't accepted. A meeting scheduled for the morning? Mandatory. The pressure point had shifted from paperwork to time, and they were counting on me to blink. I didn't go inside. I took the chair by the cafe window across the street, the one with a clear line to the lobby doors. Laptop open, phone face down. The building looked the same as it always had. Which was the point. They expected me to arrive early, apologize quietly, and sit in a room while someone read from a script. I typed one email. No subject line. Straight to compliance and the board. I received termination notice via SMS, per federal level 4 protocol. I have initiated a full operational freeze to prevent credential misuse. I sent it and closed the laptop. The first call came in less than a minute. I let it ring. A second followed, then a third. Stacked tight enough to blur. Messages piled up. Urgent. Immediate. Please advise. I flipped the phone over and watched the notifications climb without opening any of them. Across the street, the lobby doors kept opening and closing. A cluster formed near security. Someone pointed at a tablet. Someone else shook their head. My phone vibrated again. This time with a name I recognized from legal. I answered. You can't do this. The voice started. Already behind the curve? The system is locked. I said. By design. A breath. Controlled but thin. We need shipments moving. Then stop using my credentials. A pause. Papers shuffled. That's not what this is about. It is now. Silence stretched long enough for the truth to surface. They hadn't expected resistance. They'd expected compliance. Maybe fear? How long can a billion-dollar company survive without its heartbeat? Across the street, a man in a blazer broke from the group and jogged toward the curb. Phone pressed to his ear. Talking too fast. A delivery truck rolled up to the loading dock and didn't move again. Another followed. Then a third. My screen lit with an internal alert I hadn't seen in years. Authorization failed. Then another. Then a cascade. Neat and unforgiving. A final call pushed through. The CEO's number. I didn't answer. I watched the building hold its breath and knew the next move wouldn't be quiet. The override attempt came without warning. My screen flashed once, then locked into a state I hadn't seen since testing. Someone inside IT was pushing past the guardrails, fast and clumsy, the way people do when they think speed will outrun consequence. A call forced its way through. "We're initiating a temporary bypass," the voice said. "Breath tight. You need to stand this down. You're already too far." I told the line. Keys clattered on their end. A muted curse. Then another voice joined. "Lower. Steadier. We have federal deadlines." "This isn't optional." It was optional an hour ago. The system responded before I could say more. A clean cascade. No alarms, no theatrics. Just confirmations stacking in the corner of the screen. Each one stamped and sealed. Automatic audit packets dispatched. Recipients populated themselves. Department of Justice. The line went quiet. Not disconnected. Quiet in the way rooms get when people are reading something they didn't expect to see their names on. "What did you do?" Someone finally asked. "I protected the authorizations." I said, "From forgery." A breath hit the mic. Sharp. "You planted this 2 years ago." I said, after the first time my signature showed up where I hadn't been. Silence again. Longer this time. I pictured the room they were in. Bodies leaning away from screens. Hands nowhere near keyboards. What if trying to erase me was the act that guaranteed they'd be investigated? Another voice cut in. "Urgent now. This can be contained." "No," I said. "It can't." My phone lit with a new alert. External this time. Intake acknowledged. Reference number assigned. The system did what it was built to do when people lied to it. Across the street, the lobby doors burst open. 2 men moved out fast. Not running, not calm. Someone else followed. Phone pressed to his ear. Eyes wide enough to miss the curb. The call ended without goodbye. I closed the laptop and stood. The trap hadn't snapped shut on me. It had snapped outward, and there was no pulling it back. The announcement hit before noon. Phones chimed across the street at the same time. The kind of synchronized alert that makes people look up from their screens instead of down. A banner slid into view on my phone. Department of Justice investigation confirmed. No adjectives, no reassurance. Inside the building, movement turned sharp. Security shifted from posture to action. A man I recognized from the executive floor appeared at the doors, flanked, his steps shorter than usual. He tried to say something over his shoulder. No one slowed down for it. My phone rang. "Arthur, I'm terminating the contract." He said when I answered, "No preamble. Core personnel breach. You're sure? I don't bluff with $75 million. A pause, then the sound of paper moving on his end. "It's done." Across the street, a screen in the lobby flickered red. Tickers rolled. Numbers dropped too fast to read cleanly. Traders don't need explanations, they read exits. When an empire collapses this fast, who survives the wreckage? Another call cut in. Legal this time. Voice stripped of authority. "We need to coordinate messaging." "You should coordinate counsel." I said, "Messaging won't help you." A breath, then a softer attempt. "You didn't have to let it go this far." I didn't. I said, "You did." The call ended without ceremony. A resignation email followed minutes later from the general counsel, time-stamped just after midnight. No farewell. No thanks. Just an absence where a name used to be. Arthur texted once more. "Markets are down 30%. I know." I watched the doors again. Another executive left carrying nothing. A third lingered, arguing with someone out of frame, then gave up. My phone buzzed with a new number. Unknown. I let it ring. Across the street, the building didn't look smaller, but it had lost its center. And without that, everything else was about to slide. They reached me before I reached the car. A call lit the screen with a number I knew too well. I let it ring once, then answered. The voice came in careful, layered with other people listening. "We need you back." It started, effective immediately. Silence on my end did the work. "Triple your salary," the voice added. "Chief Operating Officer, full authority." I pictured the office they were calling from. Glass walls, doors closed but not locked. People nodding because nodding feels like action. What happens to the investigation? I asked. A pause. Papers shifting. That would be addressed. Arthur's text arrived while the call waited. A location. No explanation. I ended the call and went. He was already seated. Jacket off, sleeves rolled, the table clear except for 2 glasses he hadn't touched. He didn't stand when I arrived. He didn't have to. They're trying to buy time. He said, "And you?" They always do. He slid a folder across the table. Not thick, clean. Start your own firm. You pick the structure. I'll be your first client. I didn't open it. If this goes further, he continued, people will go to prison. The words landed heavy because they weren't a threat. They were a forecast. What does justice cost when silence would make you rich? I pushed the folder back. I'm not here to negotiate my exit. Arthur studied my face, then nodded once. Then we're aligned. My phone buzzed again. The board. Still calling. Still hoping the right title could put a lid on what was already burning. Arthur stood. I'll make the next call. He said, you should make yours. Outside. The air felt thinner. I didn't answer the board. I typed a different number instead and hit send, knowing the choice would close doors I couldn't reopen and open ones I couldn't control. The holding room smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. He sat on the other side of the glass. Jacket gone. Tie loosened. Hands folded the way people do when they think stillness might look cooperative. He didn't look up when the phone vibrated on the metal table in front of him. The guard nudged it closer. Don't bother coming back. You're fired. No signature. No punctuation. The same sentence he'd used on me returned without ceremony. I didn't wait to see his reaction. I'd already learned what I needed to know about men who confuse authority with permanence. Outside, my phone buzzed again. Arthur, once, then silence. The board sent one last message. Stripped of titles and promises, asking for a conversation. I let it sit. The truth didn't come out in a press release. It moved quietly, the way facts do when they finally have room. The founder's name surfaced in old filings. Mine appeared where it had always belonged. I'd hidden it for years because systems fail when people start protecting bloodlines instead of process. I built the guardrails so no one would have to trust me on faith. They fired me without knowing who I was. That part mattered less than the fact they never asked what I protected. A man from legal caught up to me in the hallway. You could still come back, he said, voice thin. There's a version of this where everyone lands on their feet. I already landed. I told him. You're just late. I walked out while phones kept ringing behind me. The building didn't fall all at once. It sagged. It shed pieces. It learned what gravity feels like when the load-bearing parts are gone. Here's what I learned and what I'm keeping if your value only exists when someone else needs to hide behind you. It's time to move. Boundaries aren't loud. They work because you enforce them before you're asked to compromise who you are. If you stayed with me through this, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time. If you've ever watched a workplace cross a line and wondered what you would do, I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. I'll keep sharing stories like this about work, power, and choosing yourself when it counts. If that resonates, stick around. 10 minutes. That was the lifespan of my 20-year career. The boardroom was a tomb of glass and steel, overlooking a Chicago skyline that looked colder than usual. Across the mahogany table, Julian, the new CEO, whose suit cost more than the annual salary of my junior analysts, slid a folder toward me. It didn't slide. It glided, weighted by the sheer gravity of what was inside. Transition acknowledgement. The header read, a polite euphemism for a professional execution. I didn't touch it. I watched Julian instead. He sat too straight, his jaw a rigid line of manufactured authority. Beside him, Sarah from HR was a study and avoided eye contact. She was staring at the table's grain as if it held the secrets to the universe. Her shoulders pulled tight. She knew. I am Marianne Caldwell. I've survived 3 mergers, 2 market crashes, and 5 CEOs. I know the smell of a desperate man. And Julian was reeking of it beneath his expensive cologne. I finally flipped to the last page. My eyes didn't linger on the severance numbers. I went straight for the fine print. There it was, Clause 14.3. The signee assumes personal indemnity for all financial disclosures filed during the transition period. My pulse didn't race. It slowed to a cold, rhythmic throb. This wasn't a firing. It was a handoff. They weren't kicking me out. They were piling the legal weight of a $500 million fraud onto my shoulders before shoving me through the door. Julian checked his Patek Philippe. The markets opened in 4 hours. He didn't just need me gone. He needed me to be the owner of the mess he'd spent the last month cooking. 10 minutes. Marianne, he said, his voice dropping into a register of fake empathy. Sign it, and we can make the exit. Graceful. I saw the slight tremor in his hand as he adjusted his tie. He was sweating. A man with a winning hand doesn't check the clock that often. He was terrified I'd read between the lines. I picked up the heavy fountain pen. I felt the weight of the ink, the weight of my own freedom. If this paper was my death warrant, why was his hand shaking more than mine? I lowered the nib to the gold embossed line. I wasn't just signing a document. I was choosing which version of the truth would survive the morning. 9 minutes left. He whispered. I looked him dead in the eye and did something he didn't expect. I smiled. The numbers hadn't just changed. They had started to lie. It began as a whisper in the spreadsheet's small surgical shifts in the margins. A decimal point moved here. A risk buffer deleted there. By the time I pulled the full acquisition file at 2 a.m., the whisper had become a scream. The $500 million deal wasn't just aggressive. It was a hollowed-out shell. A financial landmine rigged to detonate 6 months after closing. I traced the digital breadcrumbs. My screen the only light in a darkened office. My stomach turned when I saw the housekeeping. Someone had been backdating my digital credentials. Approval timestamps I never authorized were suddenly blooming across the compliance trail like a digital rash. They weren't just cooking the books, they were using my identity as the chef's apron. If this deal went south and with these numbers, it was a mathematical certainty the trail ended at my desk. A ping shattered the silence. An internal message from the CFO's right-hand man compliance trail updated for the Chicago deal. Just tidying up the loose ends. Marianne, go home. Tidying up is what you do to a crime scene. I realized then that Julian was just the face of the operation. Behind him were the shadow partners, the private equity ghouls who wanted their exit bonuses before the walls caved in. They didn't want my expertise. They wanted my silence, followed by my sacrifice. I didn't save the file. I didn't leave a trace. I simply sat in the dark, watching the cursor blink a steady, rhythmic heartbeat. They had spent weeks building a cage out of my own reputation. The mandatory executive sync invite popped up on my phone for the next morning. No agenda, no witnesses, just a slaughterhouse appointment. I stood up, grabbing my coat. They thought they had me cornered in a numbers game, but they forgot one thing: I'm the one who taught them how to count. The folder waited on the mahogany, angled toward me like a dare. I picked up the heavy fountain pen. The room leaned in. A collective inhalation of held breath. Julian wasn't looking at my face. His eyes were glued to my hand. HR's breathing had gone shallow, a rhythmic, panicked wheeze that echoed off the glass walls. Make it clean. Marianne, Julian murmured, his finger tapping the table. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of a man who thought he had already won. I didn't sign my name. Instead, I used my old internal auditor's cipher, a legacy ID code we'd retired 5 years ago, but one that still lived deep in the server's high-risk flag architecture. Beside it, I added a tiny, slanted compliance marker, ref 10K/E. To the untrained eye, it looked like a standard professional flourish. To the company's automated risk management system, it was a silent alarm, a duress signal that would immediately freeze any document from being processed for external wire transfers. The pen paused. I felt the vibration of the building, the hum of a $500 million engine about to blow. Then, I finished the stroke and slid the folder back. Julian's smile was sharp, relief cutting through his polished mask. He didn't even look at the signature. He just saw ink. HR, however, went deathly pale. She was the only one old enough to recognize the code. She looked at me, her eyes screaming, but her lips stayed sealed. Security will escort you out, Julian said, his voice regaining its oily arrogance. We'll courier your personal effects. I stood before he could finish. I left the pen, my weapon, on the table. As the elevator doors slid shut, I pulled out my burner phone. I sent a single, pre-drafted text to an encrypted line at the SEC and the lead partner of the auditing firm. Check the metadata on the transition acknowledgement. Look for the E code. The elevator descended, the pressure in my ears shifting. My reflection in the brushed steel was unrecognizable, not a victim, but a ghost in the machine. I had just handed him the rope he'd been begging for, and I had even tied the knot. As I stepped into the lobby, my phone buzzed. The first domino had fallen. They caught me at the edge of the parking garage, their breath huffing in the cold Chicago air. Marianne, wait. It was David and Elena, my two best lieutenants. David already had his lanyard in his hand, his knuckles white. We're out. If they're cutting you, they're cutting the only person who kept this place honest. We're resigning. Now. Elena nodded, her jaw set. HR can't ignore a mass exodus of the entire senior desk. I didn't smile, though I wanted to. Their loyalty was a rare currency in this building. But right now, it was a currency I couldn't afford to spend on a gesture. Put your badges back on, I said, my voice dropping to a low, lethal calm. David blinked, stunned. You want us to stay? After that public execution? If you walk out now, you're just disgruntled ex-employees. You'll be part of a cultural transition narrative that Julian will spin by lunch. I stepped closer, my reflection ghosting against the garage's concrete pillars. I don't need martyrs. David, I need witnesses. I saw the realization hit Elena first. Her eyes widened. Stay, I commanded. Document every urgent request Julian makes. Every offshore wire transfer he tries to bypass. Every time he asks you to look the other way on the Chicago deal. I want a time-stamped memo sent to your private servers. You're asking us to sit inside a burning building, Elena whispered. No, I countered. I'm asking you to be the ones holding the extinguishers when the investigators arrive. If you leave, he replaces you with people who will help him hide the bodies. Stay. Be the friction in his gears. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of the risk I was asking them to take. David slowly clipped his badge back to his belt. It felt like a soldier rearming. Text me when the first wire fails, I said. And if anyone mentions my name as the responsible party, record it. Illinois is a two-party state, but fraud is a federal exception. I got into my car without looking back. As I pulled out, my phone buzzed with an encrypted alert from the audit trail I'd triggered. Alarm transaction blocked. Reference 10K/E. Internal review initiated. The fire was starting. I just needed my sentinels to make sure it burned the right people. The call came at 11:42 a.m., a jagged, frantic vibration that rattled the coffee cup on my kitchen table. I didn't rush. I watched the caller ID Julian office blink like a warning light before I finally swiped. I didn't say hello. I just listened to his breathing heavy, ragged, the sound of a man who had just seen a ghost. What did you do to the file? Marianne. His voice was a strangled rasp. The oily arrogance from the boardroom had been stripped away, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. I leaned back, watching the sunlight hit the floor. I gave you exactly what you asked for. Julian. My signature. The banks flagged it. He roared, and I heard the unmistakable sound of a glass shattering against a wall. The wire transfer for the Chicago acquisition is in a hard lock. Compliance didn't just flag it. They triggered a coercion protocol. The SEC's automated gateway just swallowed the entire disclosure package. $500 million doesn't just stall. It creates a vacuum that sucks the air out of the building. That's the beauty of the legacy system, I said. My voice as cool as the glass in his office. It's designed to protect the firm from rogue actors. If a senior officer signs under duress using a distress code, the system doesn't just stop the money. It archives every edit made to that file in the last 48 hours, including the backdated timestamps. The silence on the other end was absolute. He wasn't just realizing the deal was dead. He was realizing he had just handed the auditors a map to his own crime. "You'll burn with me," he hissed. "You signed the indemnity. I signed a digital alarm. Julian, there's a difference." I hung up as a text from Elena flashed on my screen. Audit team just walked into the boardroom. "Julian looks like he's having a stroke." "What's next?" I typed back. "Check the unallocated folders. He's going to try to delete the shadow decks. Don't let him." The money had stopped moving. Now, the truth was starting to... The caller ID didn't need a name. I recognized the area code, a private line from a house in the Hamptons I'd visited every summer for a decade. It was Arthur, my mentor, the man who taught me how to read a balance sheet before I could read a room. I answered, my voice a hollow echo. "Arthur, you were always my best student." "Marianne," he said. His voice as smooth as aged scotch, resilient, precise. "That's why it had to be you." I felt the temperature in the room drop. "You were in the room when Julian drafted Clause 14.3, weren't you?" "I was the one who suggested it," he replied, without a hint of shame. "The Chicago deal is a systemic necessity. The firm stays afloat, the partners stay rich. But the SEC needs a sacrificial lamb to close the file. I chose you because I knew you'd survive the investigation better than anyone else." The betrayal wasn't a knife in the back. It was a calculated business expense. He hadn't sold me out for money. He'd sold me out for stability. What did you get for my career? Arthur, a seat on the global board. Influence, Marianne. The kind that protects the next generation. There is no next generation if you burn the foundation to keep the attic warm. I snapped. "Don't be emotional." He sighed. The sound of a disappointed teacher. "Accept the severance. Take the fall. In 3 years, I'll bring you back as a consultant. This is just theater." "Then I hope you enjoy the final act," I said, my thumb hovering over the end button. "Because I'm not playing the martyr, I'm playing the whistleblower." "Marianne, wait." I cut him off. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. My burner phone buzzed an encrypted folder from Elena. Title Project Crown. It was the secret ledger Arthur thought he'd hidden years ago. He hadn't just betrayed me today. He'd been preparing for this theater for years. I opened the file. The first page contained his private signature. I didn't feel like a student anymore. I felt like the prosecutor. The internal servers were screaming. Even if the office remained silent, by Tuesday morning, the polite masks had finally cracked. My sentinels, David, Elena, and 3 others who had joined the silent resistance were being bombarded. The emails had shifted from checking in to immediate action required. Julian was trying to force a mass backdating of the risk assessment logs to cover the holes I'd left. "He's cornering me in the break room." "Marianne," Elena whispered over an encrypted line, her voice trembling. "He said if I don't sign off on the June disclosures, I'm not a team player." He hinted at my pension. "He's not asking for teamwork." "Elena," I said, staring at the Chicago skyline from my kitchen window. "He's asking for an accomplice. If you sign that, you're the one the SEC will come for when the wire fraud charges land. Tell him you'll sign, but only if the request comes through official company email with a CC to legal." "He won't do it," she said. Exactly. By noon, the first domino fell. A senior analyst in accounting resigned on the spot after being told to fix the interest projections. Then another. The exodus wasn't a protest. It was an evacuation. Then came the audio file. Elena had left her phone recording during an emergency briefing. Julian's voice was a jagged blade. Marianne Caldwell was a rogue element. He sneered. Her duress code was a desperate attempt to hide her own incompetence. We are the victims here. He was building a public gallows for me. He thought that by being the loudest person in the room, he could rewrite the truth. I didn't panic. I forwarded the recording to the lead investigator at the SEC along with a copy of Project Crown. He thinks control comes from the microphone, I told my team in our group chat. But control comes from the paper trail. Don't argue. Don't fight. Just keep asking for everything in writing. Let the silence do the work. A reply came back from David. He's calling a town hall for 4:00 p.m. He's going to name names. I typed back, let him speak. It's much easier to catch a man when he's busy digging his own grave. It wasn't a riot, it was an eclipse. By Thursday, the office hadn't just lost staff, it had lost its pulse. The silence in the hallways was heavier than any shouting match. One by one, the quiet resignations hit Julian's desk like muffled gunshots. No exit interviews, no emotional goodbyes, just laptops left on empty desks and badges sitting next to cold coffee cups. I sat in my home office, watching the ripple effect on my monitor. The company's internal directory was graying out as IT deactivated accounts. The Chicago deal just hit a terminal wall. David texted me at 2:15 p.m. The lead underwriter called. He asked for you. When Julian told him you were no longer with the firm, the underwriter hung up. 5 minutes later, their formal withdrawal notice hit the portal without my name on the compliance certs. The $500 million deal didn't just stall, it evaporated. Julian had fired the only person the banks actually trusted. And now the banks were clawing their money back. The phone on my desk rang. It was the CEO of our largest client, a man who didn't care about boardroom drama, only results. "Marianne," he said, skipping the pleasantries, "I'm looking at a ship with no captain and a hull full of leaks. My board is pulling our portfolio by end of day, unless you tell me there's a reason to stay." "I can't give you that reason," I said, my voice steady, "but I can tell you where the lifeboats are. I'll have my lawyers call your new firm." He replied. The weight of it finally settled. This wasn't revenge, it was gravity. You can't remove the foundation and expect the skyscraper to stand just because you're shouting at the clouds. My screen flashed with a final alert from Elena. Emergency board meeting called for 5:00 p.m. Julian is being barred from the floor. Security is standing outside his office. "It's over, Marianne." I closed my laptop. The silence in my house was finally peaceful. I wasn't just a former executive anymore. I was the one holding the map to the rubble. They arrived at my doorstep just as the streetlights flickered to life, Julian's legal counsel and the HR director. They looked diminished. The sharp edges of their corporate armor dulled by 48 hours of panic. I didn't invite them into the living room. I led them to the kitchen table, where the light was harsh and unforgiving. The lawyer didn't waste time with pleasantries. He slid a vellum folder across the wood. Inside was a non-disclosure agreement, heavy on the non and a check. The amount was already filled in. It was more than I'd earned in the last 5 years combined. "This is a global settlement, Marianne," the lawyer said, his voice strained. "It covers everything: the termination, the Chicago deal, and a lifetime mutual non-disparagement clause. Sign it, and the SEC investigation becomes a private internal matter." I didn't look at the numbers. I looked at Sarah, the HR director. Her hands were shaking. She wasn't here for the company. She was here because she realized her signature was on the same forged documents as Julian's. "You're not buying my silence," I said, pushing the check back with a single finger. "You're trying to buy your way out of a subpoena." "Don't be sanctimonious," the lawyer hissed, leaning in. "This money secures your family's future. If you refuse, the litigation will last a decade. We will bury you in discovery." "You can't bury someone who has already walked out of the grave," I replied. "I've already turned over the Project Crown files. The discovery has already happened. You're just waiting for the knock on the door." Sarah's phone chimed a sharp, frantic sound. She looked at the screen, and the little color left in her face vanished. "The board just revoked Julian's indemnity," she whispered. "They're handing him over." The lawyer stood up so fast his chair screeched against the tile. The global settlement was suddenly a worthless piece of paper. They didn't even take the check when they left. They just scrambled for the door. Two people realizing they were on the wrong side of history. I watched their taillights disappear. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I'm at the front gate. I have the rest of the ledger. Arthur. The architect was ready to talk. The news didn't break with a bang. It arrived with a funeral-like silence. Julian was removed for health reasons, the corporate euphemism for a legal radioactive leak. The $500 million acquisition didn't just fail, it was absorbed by the very private equity firm I had secretly joined as a strategic partner. 1 week later, I walked back into that boardroom. The glass walls were the same, but the air felt different, thinner, cleaner. Julian was there, sitting in the visitor chair I had occupied when he fired me. He looked 10 years older, his expensive suit hanging off a frame that had lost its posture. Arthur, my mentor, sat in the corner, a ghost of a man watching his protege take the head of the table. Julian slid a single sheet of paper toward me. Mutual civil immunity, he rasped. The board agreed. If you sign this, the firm drops all internal claims against your distress code usage. And in exchange, you agree not to testify in the civil suit regarding the backdating. He pushed a pen toward me. It was the same gold-nibbed pen I'd left on this table 10 days ago. Sign it, Marianne. Arthur added from the shadows, his voice a plea. Let's end this theater. Everyone gets to move on. I looked at the paper. I looked at the pen. Then, I looked Julian directly in the eye. I learned a valuable lesson in this room, I said, my voice echoing with a calm that terrified them. I learned that a signature isn't just ink. It's a transfer of soul. You didn't want my cooperation. You wanted my ghost to haunt the evidence so you could walk away clean. I stood up, leaving the folder closed and the pen untouched. I won't be signing, I said. I've already spent 20 years carrying the weight of men who were too afraid to carry their own. I'm done. As I walked out, Julian's hand stayed hovered over the paper, trembling. He was a man with all the money in the world and no way to buy his way back into the light. I stepped onto the Chicago sidewalk and took a breath of the freezing, honest air. I didn't have a settlement check. I didn't have an NDA. What I had was my name untainted, unbought, and entirely mine. True power isn't in what you're willing to sign. It's in knowing exactly when to set the pen down and walk away. 10 minutes, that was all he gave me before sliding the paper across the table like it was already decided. The room held its breath. The glass walls reflected faces that refused to look back at me. Across the table, the new chief executive sat too straight in a chair that hadn't molded to him yet. Tie perfect, jaw tight. The document stopped inches from my hands. Transition. Acknowledgement. His watch flashed as he checked it again. I didn't touch the paper. I watched him. The tapping of his finger on the folder wasn't impatience, it was timing. HR sat to my left, eyes fixed on the grain of the table, shoulders drawn in. Fear does that to people who know exactly where the line is and that they've just crossed it. My name is Marianne Caldwell. I am 46 years old. The thought arrived with a strange calm as I scanned the page and felt the temperature in the room change. Buried near the end was a clause that didn't belong to a termination. Personal legal responsibility for financial disclosures during the transition period. Not a goodbye. A handoff. Not severance. Exposure. I felt my pulse slow. This wasn't about removing me. This was about moving weight onto me. He leaned back, smile thin, and checked his watch again. Markets would open in a few hours. He needed something finished before that happened. Needed it clean. Needed it now. I turned the page once more, letting the silence stretch. HR shifted. The faint scrape of her chair loud in the quiet. She knew what this was. She also knew there was no script for when the person across from you understands the trap before you finish setting it. I slid the folder back an inch and met his eyes. Sweat darkened the fabric at his collar. Polished men don't sweat unless the clock is working against them. 10 minutes, he said. Softer this time. Like urgency could pass for courtesy. I picked up the pen and rolled it between my fingers, feeling the weight of it, the expectation attached to it. This wasn't a signature, it was a transfer of blame, dressed up as procedure. In the final third of this story, it's worth noting briefly that what you're reading is a fictional account created by our writing team, shaped from common workplace conflicts and imagined outcomes, told for narrative effect. I placed the tip of the pen over the line and let it hover. If this paper could end my career and my freedom, why did he need my signature so badly I lowered the pen? The numbers had started whispering to me weeks before the meeting. Not loudly, not enough to set off alarms, just small shifts, rounded margins where there used to be sharp ones. Timing changes that shaved risk on paper but stacked it somewhere else. I'd noticed them late one night, alone in my office, the building half dark, the system clock blinking past midnight. I pulled the acquisition file again. Same result. The adjustments weren't random. They all pointed in one direction. Make the deal look safer before it crossed the line. Then move the exposure after it closed. My phone buzzed. A message from finance? Casual on the surface. We updated the compliance trail for the acquisition. Just housekeeping. Housekeeping doesn't rewrite responsibility. I followed the trail backward. Click by click until the pattern became obvious. Oversight markers were being reassigned. Approval timestamps nudged. The name attached to the final review mine appeared where it hadn't been before. Quiet, clean, invisible unless you knew where to look. I leaned back and let the screen go dark. If the acquisition went through at $500 million, the upside was enormous. Bonuses, carried interest, the kind of numbers that change who gets invited into rooms. If it failed, if regulators started pulling threads, the person holding the compliance pen would be the first to fall, and somehow, without a single meeting or email asking for consent, that person had become me. The CEO hadn't done the math himself. That much was clear. He repeated talking points too smoothly, leaned on phrases that came from decks he hadn't built. The real pressure came from elsewhere, quiet men with clean hands and long memories, backing him, pushing speed over caution. They didn't need me gone because they disliked me. They needed me placed, positioned, ready. I stared at the screen and felt the last pieces click together. When the deal exploded, who was supposed to be standing in front of it? The answer wasn't abstract anymore. It had my access badge, my signature line, my career attached to it. The next morning, an invite appeared on my calendar executive sync. Mandatory. No agenda. No prep. Just a time. A room, and a silence that felt intentional. I closed the file without saving and shut down my screen. Whatever was coming next wasn't about numbers anymore. It was about timing, and I could already feel it tightening. The folder waited where he'd left it, angled toward me like a dare. I picked up the pen. The room leaned in without moving. He watched my hand, not my face. HR's breathing had gone shallow. The sound carried in the quiet. Someone at the far end shifted a glass and stopped halfway. Like even that was too loud. Make it clean, he murmured, tapping the edge of the table. The tap wasn't for me. It was for the clock. I didn't sign my name. I wrote the legacy identifier I'd used years ago. Back when we built the archive to remember what people tried to forget, I added the compliance annotation marker beside it, small, ordinary, invisible to anyone who hadn't been there when we hid it in plain sight. To the room, it looked like ink finding its place. To the system, it read something else entirely. The pen paused. A breath. Then I finished the stroke and slid the paper back. His smile came fast. Relief cutting through the polish. HR went pale. One hand braced against the table like she might need it. No one congratulated anyone. No one thanked me. The chair at the head of the table creaked as he leaned back. Already thinking past me? Security will walk you out, he added. Too casually, I stood before anyone else could. The pen stayed on the table. I didn't look at it again. In the hallway, my phone vibrated once. I kept walking and typed without slowing, using the account that didn't carry my name. Subject review section 4.2 before market open. No body, no signature. Just the line they'd missed because they thought speed made them safe. The elevator doors closed. The hum started. My reflection stared back. Steadier than I felt. Had I just sealed my fate or encoded the evidence that would bury them? The doors opened onto the lobby. Security nodded, unsure which side of the moment they were on. I stepped forward and felt the shift settle behind me. The kind you don't hear until it's already moving. Outside, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't silent. They caught up to me before I reached the parking structure. Marianne, wait. Two voices, tight with the same instinct. Stand together, walk out together, make it visible. I stopped but didn't turn. The glass doors reflected all three of us. Security hovering too close for comfort. We're done, one of them said. His badge was already off, clenched in his fist. We're not staying after what he did. The other nodded, eyes sharp. HR can't stop all of us. That was the problem. They thought this was about stopping something. I finally faced them and lowered my voice until they had to lean in. If you leave now, they'll call it a protest. An emotional exit? They'll bury everything else. A pause. Confusion flickered. Then resistance. So what? He shot back. We'd just pretend nothing happened. No, I said. Steady. You stay. You watch. You don't sign anything without copies. You document every request, every meeting, every quick favor. The word favor landed hard. They knew what it meant. The other one swallowed. That's asking us to sit in it. Yes, I stepped closer, because this ship is going down. And I need you holding the lifeboats, not swimming away too early. Their shoulders sagged, the weight settling in. They weren't afraid for me. They were afraid of what staying would cost them. Why would I ask the people I trusted most to remain inside a sinking company? A security guard cleared his throat behind us. The moment was closing. I won't ask again, I said. If you stay all the way. No warnings, no heroics. They exchanged a look. The decision passed between them without words. Text me if anything shifts, I added. And if anyone mentions my name in a sentence that ends with responsibility, I want it recorded. I turned before they could answer. Before doubt could surface again, my phone vibrated in my hand, an unfamiliar number. Persistent. As I stepped into the car, the message came through deal activation window confirmed. Need resolution. They were moving faster now. The call came before noon, sharp and fast, like a door slammed too hard. My phone vibrated again before I answered. I let it ring once more, then tapped the screen and set it on the table between my hands. His voice hit first, tight, loud, no greeting. What did you do? I pictured him standing, pacing, jacket off now. Sleeves rolled as if effort could force systems to comply. I waited until he ran out of air. The transaction won't clear. He snapped. Banks flagged it. Compliance froze the line. This was supposed to move today. I kept my voice even. You had the signature, a pause, paper shifting, someone whispering in the background. Cut off mid-sentence. The system kicked it back. He said, slower now. Red status. Coercion marker. Do you have any idea what that does to a deal this size? $500 million doesn't stall quietly. It drags everything with it. My screen lit up with a message from an unfamiliar number. Review pending. Do not proceed. Another followed. This one from a contact who never texted unless things were already broken. Audit hold in place. What happens when $500 million freezes and everyone needs someone to blame? Silence answered me. Not confusion, recognition. You think this makes you untouchable, he said, dropping the volume, changing tactics. It doesn't. People get crushed in reviews. I signed. I said, didn't you check the system? The line went dead. A second later, it came back HR this time. Her voice shook despite the effort to steady it. We need to talk. There are implications. I'm sure there are. She tried again. This could get messy. I watched another alert slide across my screen. Disbursement paused. Then another. Counterparty requesting clarification. Messy was the word people used when they realized control had shifted and they weren't holding it anymore. I ended the call and set the phone face down. My other device buzzed a single word from one of the two still inside. They're asking for confirmations. I typed back without hesitation. Record everything. Sign nothing. Outside, traffic moved like nothing had changed. Inside the system, everything had stopped. The call came from a number I hadn't saved in years, but my thumb hesitated anyway. I answered without greeting. His breath filled the line first. Steady, practiced. You're handling this well. He said, like it was an assessment. I knew you would. I leaned against the counter and let the silence stretch. He filled it. The way he always had when he wanted control. They needed a name. He continued. Someone credible. Someone resilient. A pause. Careful. You've always been resilient. The word landed wrong. I felt it, the not heat, not anger pressure. like something finally aligning. You knew? I said, a soft exhale, not denial. I told them it would hurt you less than it would hurt someone else. My fingers tightened around the phone. In exchange for what? Another pause, longer this time. A seat, influence, a chance to steer things after the dust settled. I pictured him in a room I used to sit in, nodding at people who had never earned his trust, wearing the look he saved for negotiations that mattered. The realization didn't sting. It clarified. If loyalty could be traded so easily, what else had already been sold? He didn't answer that. He tried a different angle. This doesn't have to end badly. You can still land on your feet. I already have. I said. His voice tightened. Be careful. I am. The call ended without ceremony. No apology. No attempt to bridge the gap. Just a clean cut. My phone lit up again almost immediately, an encrypted file from inside. No name attached. I didn't open it yet. I didn't need to. The weight of it was enough. I set the phone down and stood there for a moment. Alone, in a way that felt absolute and oddly light. Whatever protection I thought I had was gone. Whatever leverage they thought they had over me went with it. The file buzzed again, insistently. I picked up the phone and unlocked it. The pressure shifted inward. Messages started landing on their desks with subject lines that sounded harmless confirmation, alignment, clean up. The language was always polite. The requests weren't. Dates adjusted, responsibility reassigned. A quiet insistence that signatures make problems disappear. One of them called me from a stairwell. Voice low and clipped. They want something backdated. Then they want a confession. I said, don't give them either. A pause. Breathing. Footsteps passing. They're pushing hard. Let them. I said, record everything. By the next morning, another voice joined the first. Then another. Short calls. Screenshots sent without commentary. A meeting invite forwarded with a single line typed beneath it. Is this normal? It wasn't. And they knew it. Late that night, my phone vibrated with a file I hadn't asked for. Encrypted, no name attached. I unlocked it and listened. The room tone came first chairs. A cough. Someone closing a door. Then his voice. Confident again. Rehearsed. He talked about narrative. About accountability. About how the company would address concerns raised by a former executive. My name followed. Clean and deliberate. Framed as the final check that failed. I stopped the audio and sat there. The phone heavy in my hand. He wasn't panicking anymore. He was preparing. How do you fight someone who plans to destroy you on television? I forwarded the file to 2 places without adding a word. Then I typed a message to the group still inside. No more calls. Everything in writing. If they ask twice, that's pressure. If they ask 3 times, that's evidence. A reply came back immediately. They just scheduled a briefing. Another followed. They're asking who's attending. I didn't answer right away. I listened to the recording again. This time all the way through. Until the cadence settled into something predictable. He thought control came from being first to speak. I set the phone down and opened a new thread. Don't go alone. I typed. And don't be quiet. The dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. Whatever came next wouldn't be subtle. And it wouldn't be contained. No one announced anything. There were no speeches. No all-hands emails pretending this was a values stand. People just stopped showing up. One resignation landed before breakfast. Another by lunch. By the end of the first day, calendars were empty where names used to be. Meetings kept getting rescheduled, then quietly canceled. The second day moved faster. A message flashed from inside. They're asking who's left. Another followed. No one wants to answer. Clients noticed before leadership did. Calls shifted tone. Words like pause and review started replacing timeline and next steps. One contract went on hold, then another. My phone rang late that afternoon. I almost didn't answer. The voice on the other end didn't waste time. Marianne, we're hearing things. I let the silence do its work. If you're not there. He continued. Slower now. We're not staying. I closed my eyes. Not from relief, but from the weight of it. That's your call. It already is. The line went dead. An alert followed. Minutes later, another account suspended pending review. The system was shedding mass, correcting for gravity. What if walking away had been the plan all along? I opened my laptop and switched to a different inbox. Fewer messages, cleaner threads, names that hadn't been on my calendar in years. The advisory firm was small by design, no office, no announcements, just agreements waiting to be activated. One message sat at the top. We're ready when you are. Another came in from inside. They're calling emergency meetings. Legal's in every room. I typed back once. Don't engage verbally. Everything documented. Outside the window. Traffic moved like it always had. Inside the company, space was opening where pressure used to be, not chaos, absence. My phone buzzed again. This time from an unfamiliar number. I didn't answer immediately. I watched it vibrate against the table, then stopped it with my palm. Whatever came next wouldn't be quiet. They arrived together just after dusk. Standing too close on my porch like proximity might soften what they were carrying. I didn't invite them in right away. I watched through the door as the man in the gray coat adjusted his cufflinks and HR tucked her folder tighter to her chest. When I finally opened it, neither smiled. We won't take much of your time, the man said. Already stepping forward, I led them to the table and put the kettle on. The sound filled the room while they laid things out with careful hands. No termination packet, no accusations. Just a single sheet folded over a check and a thicker document with a familiar title. Non-disclosure agreement. HR kept her eyes on the table. The man pushed the check toward me. The line was blank. This makes everything go away, he said, cleanly. I poured the tea and set a cup in front of each of them before taking my seat. The steam rose between us. I didn't touch the papers. What do you do when the people who silenced you now beg for quiet? The man shifted. This isn't begging. It's an opportunity. For who? For everyone, he replied quickly. You included. I picked up the check, felt its weight, then slid it back until it touched his folder. My reputation costs more than this. HR flinched. We're trying to protect you. You're trying to protect the timeline. I said, those are different things. The man leaned forward. Voice lower now. If this escalates, it gets ugly. It already did. I said, and finally met his eyes. You're just late to it. Silence stretched. HR's phone buzzed. She checked it without meaning to and went pale. They're asking for signatures again, she whispered. I stood and walked them to the door without another word. The man hesitated, then slid the NDA toward me one last time. I didn't take it. After they left, my phone lit up with a new message from an unfamiliar number. One line. No greeting. We need to talk. Now, the news broke quietly, the way serious things often do. He was removed pending investigation. The word temporary was used, then quietly dropped. Meetings vanished from calendars. Access changed hands. By the end of the week, the company wasn't fighting anymore. It was being sold. I learned who the buyer was when my phone rang from a number I recognized for different reasons. The firm I joined as a strategic partner didn't celebrate. They moved, documents appeared, decisions landed. The deal closed without drama. I returned to the boardroom on a gray morning. Not as an employee, not as a favor. The room hadn't changed. The chair had. He sat where I once did, shoulders tight, eyes tracking every movement like the floor might tilt. A folder waited in front of him. A pen rested on top. Civil immunity, he said, pushing it toward me. His voice tried for steady and missed. Standard. Clean. We both move on. I didn't sit. I read the first page, then the last. I set the folder down where it was and left the pen untouched. I learned something from you. I said, pressure doesn't come from silence. It comes from needing someone else to carry your risk. He swallowed. Just sign it. I stepped back. The space between us did the rest. He reached for the pen, stopped, then let his hand fall. The meeting ended without anyone saying it was over. Outside, the air felt lighter than it had in months. Not because I won, but because I didn't bend. The lesson I carry forward is simple. Never trade your name for someone else's urgency. If a situation demands your signature under pressure, it usually isn't for your benefit. Protect your work, your record, and your boundaries, even when it costs you comfort. Thanks for staying with me through this. If any part of it felt familiar, I'd like to hear what stood out to you in the comments. And if you want more stories about standing your ground at work, follow along. I'll be here.